welcome back. I'm Tedward, and today, thanks to McGovern Hyundai in Wilmington, Massachusetts, we're finally getting our hands on the Hyundai Elantra N. This is the 2023 version of the car, no changes since last year. And it is the main competition for the Honda Civic Type R, which, if you're new here, I own one. So I'll do my best to be relatively unbiased about my decision. But the fact that I've got so much seat time in the Honda Civic Type R is going to help me evaluate the Elantra N and kind of decode what is going on here. So what's the deal? We've got a 2-liter 4-cylinder turbo engine making 276 horsepower and 289 pound-feet of torque. Those are no small numbers, despite the fact that Honda is making over 300 horsepower. But keep in mind, this Elantra N is priced just under $35,000, where the Civic Type R, which is even harder to get than this, is priced at about $45,000, 10 grand off for this Elantra N. And I'm excited to find out if it holds up and stacks up against the Type R. Before we go any further, let's just talk about Hyundai's N division. They basically poached some of the top dogs at the BMW M division to head up this project back in 2015. And since then, they've come out with some pretty incredible machines that handle like monsters. And it's really given some cachet to the Hyundai brand, which is typically seen as just a budget version of Japanese cars. But now Hyundai has started to carve out an identity all their own. No longer are they just copycats of Hondas and Toyotas. They have a style. They've got their own thing going on. And actually, at this point, I am more into Hyundai's designs than BMW's designs, because it seems like they took the best of the best. So while we're driving, we're going to try to find out if there's some BMW M DNA in here. But gluing us to the road is a 245 section tire mounted to a 19-inch wheel. But this does not have the 2-piece floating rotors or the 4-piston calipers that you would see on a Honda Civic Type R. So we can start to see little by little where there were costs shaved down, but this does trump it in quite a few incredible ways. But first, let's just talk about styling. The Elantra is a little love-hate. This is not a new body design. It's been out for a while, but I think the Elantra N really ratchets it up a notch, especially with the monster exhaust. And by the way, it is actually loud. And if you've been living under a rock and haven't heard the case from the California driver who got pulled over and then completely screwed over by the state of California for his stock Elantra N exhaust, yeah, let me just start it up. You got to hear this thing. So you start to get an idea that this exhaust doesn't sound like your normal stock exhaust. It definitely has quite a loud grumble and lots of crackles and pops on the downshifts, which we're going to experience on today's drive. But unlike the Civic Type R, this is not a hot hatch. This is just competing in the front-wheel drive category of fun cars. But in the trunk, we still have loads of space. But look at the chassis bracing back there. We've got something that says we mean business about keeping this thing rigid. And in the rear, pretty standard stuff, but you'll notice you have 3 seats back here. You can put someone in the middle. That is not a possibility in the Honda Civic Type R. So if you need to hold 5 people in your vehicle, that's already a pretty big strike against the Honda. And the rear seats are pretty nice. You've got this like suede material that locks you in, which makes you feel good, especially if you're going to have somebody up front in their supportive seats thrashing around some corners. You don't want to be floating around back here, but you don't get any cup holders. There's no cup holders. That's a point in favor of the Honda Civic Type R, because despite not having an armrest or a middle seat, it does have cup holders back here. And before we get into all the fun stuff in the front, let's take a look under the hood. Fairly heavy hood and no hood struts, but that's okay. This reveals our 2-liter Hyundai turbocharged 4-cylinder, doing the work, putting out reasonable power. 276 horsepower is nothing to scoff at. But before we get in to see how it drives, check out these seats. The N badge seats look really good. They've got these little pass-throughs as if you're going to put a 6-point harness in it. And man, these are just very clever looking. These look very, very premium. They are not power adjustable, but neither are the Civics. They don't have quite the same outrageous side bolstering on the leg, but that makes it easier to get in and out of. To start the Elantra N, I've got the key in my pocket, foot on the brake, and we have an engine start-stop button here. Jumps right to life, and you'll notice I did not have to put my foot on a clutch because, oh, there is no clutch. There is an available 6-speed manual transmission. This has the 8-speed DCT, which actually I'm excited to drive this version of the car because it's really almost unfair to compare manual transmissions to Honda. Honda has like the best in the game. The shifter feel of a Type R is almost better than a GT3, and I know that sounds insane, but you know what? It is what it is. So I actually want to see what Hyundai brings to the table in this category at this price point with a pretty clever dual clutch transmission. Big win here. Handbrake. Oh, what I would do for a handbrake in my Type R. Dashboard, a little bit boring with this sort of tacked on screen, but we can change it. And then we start to open our exhaust valves. We can hit this button and it gives us a fiery display for our tachometer. Tells us oil temp, engine temp, turbo, pressure, and torque. Very cool stuff. So let's put it in drive. See what she has to offer. Already hearing some fun noises out of this engine. I'm really excited because I feel like already at low speeds, there's a lot more emotion in this drivetrain, this powertrain, than the Honda. So first, let's just see what she does off the line. We're not going to do like a launch control. I'm going to nurse it off the line just a little bit. She's got the chops. That is quick. That is quick enough to compete with the likes of the Civic Type R. And it sounds pretty good doing it. Now this, just like the Civic, has a limited slip differential. It's doing a lot of work to try to keep those front wheels planted and, you know, under traction conditions. It's easy with so much power and torque to just smoke these out. Back in the day when we had like neon SRT4s, they couldn't really put down the power, but they're doing a good job of it here. Wow, listen to that. There's immediately a sensation of emotion and excitement that they've built into this powertrain that is definitely not present in my daily driver in my Honda Civic Type R. Steering is where I start to feel the BMW M Division DNA. And I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. I feel like it's a little heavy. They went a little overkill on weighting this thing to make it feel sporty, and they didn't need to because it feels pretty sporty already. Now, I'm also very much used to my Honda Civic Type R steering, which is a bit on the light side. So that's a stark difference between the two cars. Now, in terms of chassis dynamics, the Civic is tough to beat because it's such an incredibly rigid chassis. This still feels rigid and planted, but I definitely don't get the same sort of darty feeling through the nose. It's a little more damped. It's a lot more damped. still a very stiff ride, but I do think it might actually be softer than the Civic. But I am impressed with the way it's just handling roads. I mean, this is no joke. It's beeping at me probably for lane keep assist while I avoid giant potholes. And this transmission is quick. This is the real deal. This is reminding me of my E92, and actually the tuning on this is a heck of a lot better. We would certainly hope so. That was from 2010. We want our 2023s to be more up to date. But I mean that with high praise, because the fact that, you know, that was a great transmission, and this is what we're getting in an Elantra. I'm being a little bit nice to it just because it's new. There is technically no required break-in period for these. However, you don't want to be a jerk to it. You still want to let it live its life. All right, on the highway, this is an 8-speed DCT. So let's go into normal mode. Quiets down a bit. Get it into 8th gear, 70-ish miles an hour at like 1,600 RPM. Nothing in the way of torque at that point. And that's the thing, is not all 2-liter turbos are created equal. This turbo does not spool as quickly as the Honda. But because you've got this 8-speed DCT, it's very easy to keep it in the power band. Silences it pretty well when you take it out of that sport mode. See, from a livability standpoint, listen to that. It just became a sewing machine. It went from a grumbly, fire-breathing monster to a sewing machine. Does a great job putting the power down coming out of a corner. We didn't really get to experience all of it here, but it does actually transfer power correctly and makes you feel confident on that throttle. I think so far my biggest gripe is just with the steering weight, because it's like this added extra effort, and I'm sure you could go in and finagle it so your custom setting on your N button here has lower steering weight, but you know, I'm not getting as much feedback through the wheel as I would like to, because it's just making it so heavy. Transmission tuning is just excellent. It is superb. I mean, we're not talking necessarily PDK levels of perfect transmission for a racetrack, but this is pretty darn good. I am genuinely impressed with its gear selections based on my inputs, and I didn't touch it through that on-ramp. That was fantastic. Good job, car. The brakes are okay. They're not wowing me. And I think this is another example of where Honda went a little crazier on certain aspects of the Type R, braking being one of them. These brakes are certainly adequate. They're going to do the job, but they don't give you the sensation that you're in like a budget Porsche, which is kind of what the Type R gives you. And I'm not bringing these things up to give points to one or the other. I think you should make your own decision, but the internet would have you believe that these two cars are essentially the same thing, and one costs 10 grand less, and one doesn't have the absurd dealer markup as the other. But I'm really not finding that to be the case. I think these cars have incredibly different characters, and I think they stand on their own independently. Now, Something that is a real big deal for the Elantra, in its favor for sure, is creature comforts. I mean, there's a little more luxury in here. We've got heated seats, we've got a moonroof. You don't get that in a Civic Type R, and if you want those things in a Civic Type R, you're going to have to pay big money when you wait for the Acura Integra Type S, which, if the Civic Type R is already a $45,000 car, you can expect that to be somewhere at or above 50 grand. We don't know yet, but look, logic is logic. So that's one of those things where, you know, if you're a money-conscious buyer, this $35,000 Elantra N with the option of an 8-speed DCT or a manual 6-speed starts to look really good, because the shortcomings in terms of, okay, maybe it has like heavier steering, maybe you like that. It doesn't quite have the same outrageous brakes as the Type R. That's okay. For normal daily use, that is not really going to impact you. This starts to look awfully delicious, but we gotta keep it in this mode because I do genuinely love the sounds this makes. And that's something that really can't be overlooked, is this car sounds great. I mentioned the Dodge SRT4 earlier. This is evoking some of that. That was a cool car and it sounded incredible, and this really does that. Whereas you're not getting that from the competition. That's special. That's really special. I really did want to avoid reviews and opinions on this car until I drove it, because I wanted to make my own assessment, but it was impossible to avoid. And what I was reading was people were taking sides between this and the Type R, primarily over money, which kind of leads you to believe that they are grouping them in like the same category as if they drive similarly. And I just disagree with that. I think these have completely different characters. And if you're somebody who's coming from, say, a BMW and you're looking for something for less money with a warranty that's still exciting and visceral a little bit, this might do the job, because I do feel more BMW than Hyundai in this machine. So rather than taking sides in this front-wheel drive race to success, I'd say go drive them. Go experience the two cars, or the three cars that you want to drive. It might include a GTI as well. And that's what's really cool about this Elantra N, is that you have to group it with hot hatches. And that is high praise. So thank you guys so much for watching, liking, commenting, and subscribing. Don't forget to respect the drive, and I'll see you in the next one. Man, this thing is awesome.